Alrighty, so we'll get into it here in 3, 2. Welcome back to another episode of Born Again Bowhunting Podcast. We're going to continue the buck battle series, and this will be the last episode of the buck battles. And today's episode is going to be private versus public. So another kind of hot topic of what you might see on social media, Facebook, any kind of platform, as far as maybe what's better, what's the go-to, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So we got Jace and Dave. So why don't you guys just a brief introduction of yourself, and then we'll get into some icebreakers, and then you guys can, I guess, get into your brand a little bit. Then we'll start the podcast.
Yep.
So whoever wants to go first, just jump in first, and then just kind of continue that, first, second. That way it stays kind of straight.
Yep.
Go ahead. I'll go second.
Yeah.
I'm Dave G. Rizzo with Tag and Brag. We have an online platform, do more of like a vlog style video where we're kind of bringing you into our outdoor hunting lifestyle all year long. On YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all your favorite social medias, and just been born into a family, lucky enough to be born into a family that kind of brought me up as a hunter and followed my passion and kind of turned it into a career now. So
awesome.
Cool.
I'm Jace Allen. I was born in Bon Terre, Missouri. I've been hunting most of my life, just been getting into the social media and kind of filming side things here in the last couple of years, but always loved being out in the woods. Started on private, end up hunting more public now, so that's a little tidbit about me.
Gotcha. Cool. So we'll hit you with some icebreakers, and then we'll, I guess, instead of reintroducing your brand again, we'll just have you guys give your opening statement of what side of the fence you're on, and then we'll get into it. So,
Yep.
So icebreaker question number 1 is, during hunting season, what's your kind of go-to drink if you stop at a gas station? Energy drink, coffee, water, you name it. What's your gotta have?
I gotta have a cold Propel in my bag at all times, especially for them all-day sits. Get some electrolytes in your system and keep you going a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all about it.
Any flavor?
I'm the kiwi strawberry, the green, whatever the green wrapping is.
Yep.
That's what I'm about.
It's a good choice.
Jace?
I tell you what, it's kind of hard for me to say no to a Monster or Rain, but I've been doing better as a healthier option, of course. Just the Body Armor Edge, electrolytes, caffeine in there. Those have been pretty good to me. So that's kind of what I like to go with. If it's really cold, I'm going with coffee, though.
Yeah. Black, or do you like some cream in there with it?
Black.
Just black.
That's honestly, everybody just says black coffee.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
You're not a deer killer unless you drink black coffee.
That's right.
Black Rifle coffee.
So question number 2 is, what kind of is your bow setup? What's your go-to bow? And then you can go into a little bit of your specs, arrow, that type of stuff too.
Yeah, so I shoot now a Matthews Phase 4. Just started shooting the new Ultra View button release this year, and absolutely I'm obsessed with it. It's just kind of like reinvented me as a bow hunter, or a bow, like just shooting, I guess.
Yeah.
Just kind of made it more fun. I don't know, new piece of equipment, you're learning it, it feels different. Your initial shots, you're not putting so much pressure on yourself, so it feels good. I'm actually going to be shooting the Ultra View scope as well for a sight, and then I shoot Victory arrows, the 350 VAP SS's, and we shoot Dirt Nap Hellhound broadheads. So.
Okay. Cool.
See, I got a Matthews. It's a BXR 28. Shoot the same kind of arrows, those Victory VAPs. I don't know what I'm running for grains on arrows. Probably somewhere around 450. Shoot Rage broadheads. I got a wrist strap for a release. I will say, like the hinge type releases, those are great for shooting. For me personally, they're not for hunting. It's a little tidbit on that. Let's see, 3-pin slider, 20, 30, 40, and then I'll dial anything past 40. Don't personally feel comfortable shooting that far for a first shot, but on a follow-up, I'm prepared to shoot out to 100. And then, that's what I got for the bow.
Okay. And then the final question is, what was your favorite trail camera that you guys ran this past season, and approximately like how many did you run?
We switched to all Moultrie edges this year and probably had, I don't know, anywhere from like we were running 20 to 25 of them. And this is multiple different states on multiple different pieces of property, but no SD card. You get a solar panel, it's pretty invincible as far as like the reliability goes, just because you got your battery set up. You don't have to worry about an SD card malfunction or failing on you. As long as you got cell service, you're pretty good to go. And traveling state to state, I mean, it's, the cell phone or the cell cameras are just so important, and they can be so timely to make a decision on a road trip or something like that when you're kind of up against the grain during the season. So,
yep.
Cool.
Well, I don't have a favorite trail camera. I ran 0 last year. Some people are nice enough to send me pictures of deer that they get on their trail cameras. But I definitely see the effectiveness of trail cameras. It's not going to be too much longer before I delve into that game.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. You need to dive into that game. It becomes an addiction.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like he said, if you're trying to cover, 3 states or whatever.
Yeah.
One guy, one set of eyeballs, he can't do that.
Yeah.
Effectively.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Definitely.
Okay.
All right, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's just come up with your opening statement on your stance of private versus public, and then we'll get into it.
And then we'll dive into the old meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
So you don't want to give up too much in your opening statement, or you want to hit them with like a hard one?
So this is probably our 4th or 5th
This will be number
episode?
4. Yeah, we've had both. We've had like just a brief hey, I'm on this side of the fence, and then we've had like a 5-minute kind of statement of this is my stance and kind of why. So whatever you guys want to do, it's your podcast.
Yeah, it's all on you guys now.
So I'm on the private land side of things. If I have a choice between private or public, that's what I'm going to choose. I just love the opportunity to get your hands dirty within the land throughout the entire year. I love giving back to the land as much as I love taking from it as a hunter. I feel like you can be a full steward when you have full access to the land and full access to manipulate the land, I guess, for the better for the wildlife. And so that's kind of my side of the fence as far as public or private goes. I'm a private guy.
Okay.
I mean, I really think it just depends on what kind of experience you want. Opening my, options up to public land has, led to me, I'm not saying you can't hunt, private land in multiple states. It is a little more expensive, but it's just giving me the opportunity to kind of expand on what ground I kind of hunt, what type of ground I hunt, or, what kind of terrain, or, all those different kind of things. I think it is nice, and it is good to know what deer do naturally whenever they're not under pressured conditions, because a guy can learn a lot from just that. If he's able to watch a deer, in a field, come out undisturbed, you're going to learn a lot more natural patterns about that deer. Rather if you have, pressured conditions, maybe you can't see that deer for as much time. Therefore, you don't get to learn as much. So I think there's benefits to both. I think guys need to do both. It's just kind of what experience you want out of it.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So on social media, there's a lot of debate on, the public land thing right now is really hot. So, a lot of guys are kind of going away from, let's say 5 to 10 years ago, the private thing was real big, like when the juries were into it, and like everybody wanted their own 40 minerals and food plots and all that. Well, now it's kind of shifting to like, you're not, I don't want to say you're not a hunter, because I hunt private mostly, and I hunt public as well. But what I'm getting at is, what do you think changed with the public versus private thing? Why are we at this debate now of who's the better hunter, because obviously we're having this podcast because it's a popular topic. So what do you guys think? Why do you think we're having this debate? I guess I'm having a hard time asking the question, but like what changed? And now if you're not hunting public, you're not a hunter, and if you're hunting private, you're just shooting unpressured deer.
It's not like a skill set thing, but it's almost like if you shoot a class buck on public, you're a better hunter than if you shoot that same class or maybe even a bigger buck on private.
Easy. I would say strictly based on social media.
Yeah.
Not our opinion at all, but I would say that like a guy based on social media prevalence, a 130 is equivalent to like a 170 on private versus public in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What you run with that, guys, for a little bit if you don't mind?
We obviously live on social media, so we see and we know it. I think the hunting public had a lot to do with that, to be honest. I think obviously social media had a lot to do with that as well, because it's exposing it all. Now it's not like the guys with money that are getting sponsored are getting airtime and are getting visibility. Now we can actually see and watch, the guys that are willing to hike in a couple miles on public land, that are willing to take a camera with them and document it. Mm-hmm. So that is all of a sudden giving people they're like, well, I don't have to have like a 10-acre food plot and sit in a box blind and watch the deer come out and pick between which 150, 160, or 170 class buck that I want, and all of them are standing in the field anyway. Like that, the TV glam is has gone away a little bit. And I think a lot of that is because of social media and because of people, average people that have a camera that are willing to document it, going out there, showing their stuff. I mean, there's pros and cons to both. I think you should experience both to have an opinion for sure. But I think that has a lot to do with it. And I think the hunting public kind of started that fad, honestly.
Yeah, I would agree. Jace, do you have anything to say to that?
I wouldn't really have anything to add to that, honestly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So from my experiences, let's touch base on that topic a little bit more and get a little bit deeper. So we could say that most people feel that private land hunters have it made, and I'm just stereotypical. We're just putting everybody in a box, right? Yeah. It's not every situation, but if we had to put private land hunters in a box and public land hunters in a box, we would say that private land hunters have thousands of acres to hunt. Nobody else is hunting it besides them, and they can choose whatever buck they want. Well, I can be the first one to say that that's not true at all, at least where I'm at. Mm-hmm. There's certain places where I feel like that is a thing, with like what Dave was saying about, somebody has a lot of money, maybe has a big farm, etc. But Dave, why don't you talk a little bit about like your struggles as a private land hunter? Because, a lot of people just assume that there aren't that many.
Yeah, I mean, for like people say private land, they all ultimately think that you have like hundreds of acres or thousands of acres at your disposal. Like when I was growing up in Ohio, I was hunting 5, 10-acre, 15-acre tracts. Yep. Like my grandpa's got 15 acres in Ohio, and it's a great little tract to deer hunt. But at the same time, you're talking about there's 10, 15, 5, 10, 15-acre tracts all stacked up next to each other. There's 100 on every single one of them. Mm-hmm. Like, You could tell me that public land is overpressured and stuff like that, and it probably is at certain times of the year, and depending on where you go and what tract of public you're talking about. But when I'm sitting there and obviously you're supplementally feeding these deer too, so there's a different, that's a whole different topic, I guess, to get into. But if you're hunting on those smaller tracts of land, that's really your only opportunity to see deer and have an opportunity consistently. Otherwise, you're just sitting in the woods and hoping and praying for the best. And so from that aspect of it, I guess it depends on the size of the land, but for me growing up, it wasn't necessary. I don't know if easier or harder is necessarily the right way to put it, but the struggles were battling the neighbors, and some of them that you could just easily see. And we still battle that right now. Like with our tract of land up in New York, I mean, we have a neighbor that, quite honestly, would do anything to block us from killing any deer, at any time of the season. Like, and he does, like, between making noise, firing unnecessary gunshots, cutting trees down on the fence line to make walls, putting blinds and tree stands up on the fence line. Like, it almost becomes like a competition that is unnecessary and not like needed in the sport, because we have enough people that are against us on the outside as it is, and like there's really no reason to go at each other. So like a lot of the struggles I think for a public or a private land person is like it could be gaining access and stuff, but in the grand scheme of it, depending on the size of the land that you hunt, it's the competition around you.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you kind of brought that one point up. So on every podcast we've had with this, it's been like, why are we so divided as a hunting group that's on one team? Because like you said, like there's so many groups and organizations after like the hunting community, and yet we're after ourselves as far as like this topic and that topic, and it's all the time. We've touched on that on every single one so far. So I'm glad you brought that up too. It's just like, we're not doing this podcast to divide each other. We're bringing it
right.
Like, hey, let's just talk about this, like have a civil conversation, try to bring each other on both sides, because honestly, so far on each one of these podcasts, I've been like how we try to, I guess, the topics that we've brought up, it's like like Matt said, you put that in a box. Like it's like, okay, the stereotypical crossbow hunter or
baiter,
non-cell cam or baiter, but like we've brought on good guys that like opens our eyes to both sides, and it's like, we're not going to take a look at somebody that's carrying a crossbow in because we don't know the backstory, or we're not going to a bait pile or whatever the case may be. It's opened our eyes, and hopefully everybody else that's listened to this too, like brings us together.
Ultimately, I mean, we want to be a community, right? The hunters, we all want to be one. We don't want to bash the next guy, and that's kind of why we started this. Is we wanted to bring on controversial topics, like Kevin was saying, and let's hash it out and try to find an even ground after everything's done.
Yeah.
So the only one that didn't get resolved was the trail camera one, which was interesting.
Cell camera, non-cell camera. Yeah. That one
did not get resolved, which was fun to listen to both sides.
Well, we heard Dave gave his side of the struggles on private. Jace, why don't you give a little 5-minute spiel on your troubles on public?
Sure. So I think the first thing, kind of like what he was talking about a little bit, is the main thing you're going to battle is pressure, and the main difference to me. I know he was just giving, examples of, small tracts of private, there's a bunch of pressure in there, but the nice thing about private is you can control the pressure on your ground. And, a lot of times throughout the deer season, if you are on, somewhere on public, you don't know if somebody was, hunting there, 2 weeks ago and it's blown up, or you don't even know if, some people hunt, even just some spots in general. I think for me personally, what hunting public land really did for me, because like growing up on private land, I'll just, again, speak about myself personally here.
Yeah.
Coming up on private land, it was, my dad taking me out, and he would be like, there's deer there. And it's just like, okay, there's deer there. And he's like, oh, there's deer there. There's not deer here. There's not deer here. And it's just like, okay. So I kind of developed a thing where as long as I know like there's deer or there is a deer there, then I'm fine. But what I realized whenever I got to public land is I had like the second part right. Like when you find deer, and like, hunt them down and, get an arrow in them. I had that part down, but I missed the first part, which was from scratch, where do you find deer? And I had like this whole like messed up belief system about like, where deer are and where deer aren't. And, you get to bigger tracts of ground, there's places where there's deer are and where there's deer aren't. And, there's places where there's pressure is and there's places where pressure isn't. one of the things that I learned early on is, you hear some people, they say, oh, well, I can look at a map and I can cross out, like 90% of it just because, it's either close to parking lots or, whatever might be the case. Well, what I learned was it was actually kind of embarrassing. There's been a lot of deer killed out of these spots that I thought were like obvious on maps, and that's like, oh, that's too easy. That's going to be pressured. There's not going to be any deer there. Come to find out, nobody was hunting it. So I had predicted or, scouted or whatever the pressure wrong in those instances. So pressure is something, and actually finding deer to start out with is something that's really, what public land did for me. It got me out of my regular comfort zones of, I know where deer are, I know I can go up on this ridge and find deer, but for some reason for me, just going from scratch and then, going to a piece of land that I had never stepped foot on before and like starting there, that was the hardest thing in the world for me. And I like challenges and hunting and all that. So that's kind of what public land has done for me.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. I've got a point to,
okay,
and then just
I'll save mine for
yours.
Later. Yeah.
We touched base a little bit on score, and I really wanted you guys to kind of dive into that. So I'm going to start with you, Jace. And I know that you're a big buck killer, and I know that you don't target, let's say like a 120, 130. But let's say hypothetically, that you're a public land hunter and you kill a 130. And the reason, a lot of guys don't like talk about score, and based on like maturity and stuff, a 130 could be a trophy potentially, but in the hypothetical world, we're going to talk about score because it's something that everyone can, in their mind, they can think of, okay, I know what a 130 looks like, and we're going to talk about a younger deer. Okay, so a younger, let's say 2.5-year-old, maybe 3.5-year-old 130. If you kill that on public, do you feel that social media would encourage that more, that you killed that 130 than say Dave shot a 130 on private?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know it for a fact.
So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's just, I don't know what it is in people's eyes, but I mean, it's, again, what you guys were talking about earlier, it's this, connotate, or I'm not even going to try it, that word. Whatever you want to call that word. It's the thing that, it's harder to kill a deer on public than it is on private. That's, that's what that's about, which is not the case. I'm not going to say all the time or none of the time. Some of the time it is that is the case. So that's what that is. Why that is, there's a lot of people that are, proud out there about their, athletic abilities and, their competitive drive and, their competitive side. That's something that everybody that, me a little bit, that's another reason why I wanted to get into public land, just because, whenever I shoot a deer, it was actually, I remember thinking this, the very first deer, the very first like decent rack buck that I shot on public land, I shot him the second to last morning before season. It was January the 14th in the morning. And the thought I had go through my head was, there is equal opportunity here for literally anybody in the United States to buy a tag and be sitting here in this tree where I'm sitting this morning, and nobody else is but me. So that was one of those things that was kind of motivating for me. And I think, does it make it better or worse than the other? No. Does it change my personal experience with it? Yeah, just because it is on public land. Yeah, it does. I guess that's just part of the nature of the beast,
And I would say you could go even like farther, which is kind of cool you're saying this. You can go farther than the hunting world. you can start looking at like the Cam Hanes and the Jockos and the Joe Rogans and like that self-motivational like speaking from those people, like that gets guys like jacked up.
Yeah.
And I think that they associate that public land, hiking, that type of thing. I think they come, which is cool. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I think that like what you kind of put that mindset upon yourself when it was freezing. It was January the 14th, and you're only one out there, and you put the work in that other people didn't do it.
Yeah.
So I think that definitely is a big part of it as well.
So before we move on to Dave's side of the same question, Jace, I want your honest opinion on like what do you feel that, like, if you were to kill a public land deer, what is it equivalent to on private? And maybe you don't feel that way, and if you don't, just be honest. But what are your thoughts?
It's been to me. It was more of an age thing. I don't really know where I stand on it now, because the deer I'm trying to chase around. I don't really care where they're at now. Whether they're private or public, I'm going to be where that deer's at. But going through that phase, it was more like an age thing. How old is this deer? Is it 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old? Didn't really care about score. And how I kind of equate it in my mind was like a 3-year-old on public is like a 4-year-old on private. Okay. Kind of that's how I equate it. Just because the 3-year-old deer had, not necessarily, but if we're going by how public land is portrayed today, that 3-year-old buck has probably been shot at 72 times.
Yeah.
And the 4-year-old deer, maybe he hasn't had that many negative occurrences, just depending on what tract of land that deer is living on. So
Gotcha. Yeah,
that's what I always got to do. But as far as like your score question, I don't know. I'd maybe just a little bit, like maybe the difference of like 10 inches, like a 140 is 150.
Okay.
Public on public versus private, maybe something like that, but not. I'm not super hardcore like that, I would say.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate the honesty and yeah, I was just curious from like your side of the fence what your opinion was. All right, Dave, same kind of question to you. If you want to dive into it and talk about it.
As far as like the score goes and everything?
Yeah. So if you were to kill a buck on private, what do you feel the equivalent public land buck would be and why?
And that's tough too. I mean, I've always been like the trophy's in the eye of the beholder. For us, like I grew up hunting in Western New York. I'm from Ohio, but grew up hunting in Western New York. And growing up, like a 2.5-year-old, like a basket, and at the ears 8-point, like that was like hang that thing up and we're driving around with the tailgate open. Yeah. Like we had 20 guys, there was 15 to 20 guys in camp with us. And if something if anything had horns, like we were celebrating. We were celebrating it all. But so for me, like it was like I almost feel like it's a public land version of, or a private land version of like a public land hunter's mindset, because now we're putting so much work in, all year long throughout the summertime to grow deer that when we were younger were unfathomable on that specific piece of ground up in New York. Like we're killing 150, 160, 170 inch deer up in New York. That was unheard of. Like if you would have said 10, 15 years ago, you killed a 170 inch deer up in Western New York, people would be like, okay, you probably killed it in Ohio and like brought it up there and tagged it up there. There's no way. So I guess I have a little bit of a different outlook, but for me, like the trophy's in the eye of the beholder. Like I am diving more into the public land, especially down here in Tennessee, because I don't have a specific track to hunt like private down here in Tennessee. So I can tell you from my personal like mindset is my standards will probably will go down a little bit in an uncontrolled environment.
Yeah.
And I'm more, same with Jace, like I'm more of the age structure. I mean, I killed a 130-inch 5-year-old up in New York last year. I was happy as hell with that.
Yeah, yeah.
It was
Yeah.
I snort wheezed him to the tree. It was situational too, right? Like this deer was going away from me. I snort wheezed him literally to the tree, and like it was an incredible shot on film. Like hit him in the heart. There was blood and stuff pouring everywhere. Like just all the aspects of that hunt made that hunt even as memorable as the year before. I shot a 170-inch deer in a blizzard up in New York off of one of our food plots. Like both of those hunts to me mean the same, and they both obviously hold a little bit of a different value. And I guess the score, the score is it. But for me, it's like I'm not going to knock somebody that is sitting on a private piece and hammers a 130-inch deer if they're happy with it. God bless, like tip your cap to them and keep going. I don't know. I guess I've never really thought about it as like the equivalent of one or the other. It's always more or less been like an age thing for me. But I think I would, like, for me personally, like the score standards would probably go down a little bit on public land, given that, it's just a different hunt. You're kind of spending more of your time, or the majority of your time goes into scouting and getting to like your destination, as where on private land, like for us on private land, more of that like homework and hard work time comes in the spring and summertime when you're putting in food plots, when you're creating cover, when you're creating watershed, when you're putting tree stands up and kind of, setting up the property for your chess match in the fall.
Yep. And yeah, I want to touch base on the score thing because I know that's like a sensitive topic, and I realize that like maturity arguably is more important than score in different aspects. But like the only reason why I brought up score was because it's easy for everybody to picture like a 130 versus a 150.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's just the reason why we score. I mean, it's why. So it's like that's the class of deer so if somebody said I shot an 8-point. Nobody knows how big it is. It could be a 160-inch 8-point that's a giant, or it could be a 120-inch 8-point that's So it's like that's why I brought the score up. But arguably, like I agree with what both of you said about the maturity aspect, and I have one other thing that kind of ties into that, and then we'll let Kev go.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm glad that you brought up the amount of work that you put in, Dave. So I want to ask this question to you, and then Jace, maybe you can follow up with any closings that you have. So why do you feel, as a private land hunter who puts in a ton of work, why do you feel that let's just call it social media, we're going to call it like the average hunter, why do you feel that social media doesn't respect the amount of work that you put in on your private land versus, like, say, somebody that would go out on public and hike 2 miles back in and kill that night?
Because they don't do it, because they don't do it. I mean, I can tell you one thing right now. If you've ever worked ground, sowed the seed, actually got it to grow, and then you sit over that over that field or over that food plot, whatever you want to call it, and you watch deer come and take advantage and nourish themselves off of what you gave them, and God forbid you get the opportunity to actually shoot like a target buck off of that same field, there's no better feeling. You just took it full circle. Mm-hmm. So those people, they've never done it before. They've never done it. That's most of the critics online either they've never done it, or they don't care to do it, so they're just going to bash it anyway. But more oftentimes than not, if they're bashing it, I can almost promise you they've never done it.
Gotcha.
They've just same with the public. I mean, same with this debate. The public versus private land debate. Who's a public land guy to say that it's better or worse if he's never hunted private land, and vice versa? Who am I to say as a private land guy that public land's harder, easier, whatever? The deer, your 130-inch deer doesn't equate to my 170-inch deer. Like, who am I to say if I haven't actually done it? So to answer your question, I think the critics come from a lack of experience.
Yeah. Could we be safe to just say, like, in all honesty, we might hurt some feelings, but could we say jealousy? Is that a fair
Well,
or they don't have the opportunity to like have a piece of private where they can put in a food plot or something, maybe
Right.
too.
Gotcha.
Maybe.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the jealousy comes from like seeing that end result and, I guess critically just bashing how you got there. But
Yeah.
the hours that come on the tractor, even just brush hogging trails to get in and out and creating access, and you're setting up your property. It's amazing how much thought and energy goes into it throughout the year, literally thinking about how you're going to get to and from a tree stand so you spook the least amount of deer possible. Like that's to somebody that doesn't actually even hunt, like that's a crazy thought. Like you're actually worried about how to get to and from your tree stand in the same woods that the deer live in so that you don't scare them. Yeah, because that matters, like it's all like those little finer details matter. So it's a chess match, and on private land you can play that chess match all year long.
Yeah. And the reason why I bring that question up, or why I brought that topic up, is a lot of guys would, like on social media, you'll see a lot of comments of like, well, I would have killed that deer too if I had that property, or if I would have killed a bigger one if I had what you have. But a lot of them don't realize the amount of work, that goes in. So if you're on the public land side, I just kind of want to open your eyes. I'm not talking specifically to you, Jace. I'm just talking in general. If we're talking about a public land hunter in a box, like maybe open your eyes up just a little bit and realize how much work goes into the prep before season, because that's stuff that you guys don't see as viewers, as like, YouTube, whatever, a TV show, whatever it may be. All that they see is that person killing that deer, but it's not. It's hard to show the process leading up to it. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. Jace, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say what I was talking about equal opportunity on public land earlier. People on private land have the same equal opportunity to get on those properties. Like you look at the really big people that get bashed all the time. Let's just say Lee and Tiffany Lukoski. They didn't start out rich. Yeah. They worked their way up to what they have today, and in that sense, everybody has the equal opportunity to do that. And to do what they're doing, that's really, really difficult, to put that much work into it. A lot of people don't want to, put that much work into it. So, again, it's, back to the jealousy thing. Nobody wants to put in, that level or that effort of work to get themselves on those bigger pieces of property where those better deer are, to give them a better chance of killing something,
I agree with that.
So in that sense, it's, equal opportunity.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Anything else to add on to that, boys, before we go to Kevy?
I don't think so.
Okay. So one thing I thought of, and we've kind of talked about this before, is like when we were younger, say you had a private piece of 40 or 50 acres, you kind of think that deer lives on that property almost all the time. Well, as we've got older and more experience, and like maybe we have a piece here, here, and here, we might get a picture of that same deer on all three different properties,
at the same day,
10 miles apart.
Yeah.
So if you're a private guy and you have, we'll just say 50 acres, that's probably a reasonable number for a farm or something like that to hunt. If you're like, because I dealt with this year, my target buck did not stay on that property very long at all throughout the season. He'd come and go a couple times, through the season.
He wasn't betting on you.
No. But like, so if you're public and that happens, you can bounce around. Private, you're kind of limited to your property lines to hunt that deer. Like, I know you could knock on doors, but that's not a guarantee that you're going to get it. And also on public, it's not a guarantee you're going to get it too, because you have multiple people hunting that same block of timber or whatever the case may be. But at least on public, you have the opportunity to pick up and move, a mile, 2 miles, whatever, however big chunk of timber you have. So if something like that would happen, how would you guys maybe target your deer or to change how you would hunt that deer if you're kind of limited and like he's only coming on maybe like 3 times a month for 2 days at a time or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I utilize trail cameras to my advantage. I mean, especially if you're kind of finding patterns that he's coming every couple weeks or whatever, and he's there for a couple days at a time when he is. But in that scenario, my probably favorite time to hunt would be late October, early November, when the scrape activity is going to be at its peak, and you can utilize trail cameras on those scrapes to get your most recent information. And based on that information, you're not going in hoping anymore. Like, you're picking the day to go kill them, essentially. And just depending on the deer's pattern or, how your property sets up, it may vary. But generally, like, if you're getting pictures close to daylight or in daylight, it's time to go, like right now. Because you may only have a couple day window. And you may only have a couple day window for the year, especially right there. But he's right there right now, and he's working that scrape. Maybe he knows a doe is close in that area, especially if he's a mature deer. If he knows like one of the local does is hot, or he knows within a couple days of when she's going to be coming into heat, he's going to be there for a couple days, and that's up to you then to go tackle that. But having like boundary lines, that's kind of your only option. You have to read the trail cameras and let the deer and the deer movement kind of dictate when you're going to go in there. Because if you're just going to go in there and hammer it, like hunt all day and hope and pray for the best, there's a good chance you already educated them and you've already missed your shot. Yeah. So I'm using trail cameras to just try and fine tune on when he's moving in daylight or close to daylight, and I'm going to base my hunting time off of that.
I was going to say something like when you said that you're very specific when you go in to hunt. I've been noticing that the trend used to be you can't kill them on the couch, but it's starting to flip to where you actually want to stay on the couch and not educate them and then go in exactly when you're supposed to go in and make that move. And then like you said, the trail cameras, you can pattern these deer. If you're in the woods every single day, you are probably not going to kill that buck.
Yeah,
it's a good chance.
Blow your property out.
Yeah, so I just think that's really fun. That's a fun like change in the mindset of hunters. Like, you need multiple properties, and you need to utilize these trail cams to pattern these deer. And if you do that, if you do it smart and you pick the right day and the right conditions, like that's the best chance you're going to have, especially with somebody that doesn't have a lot of property. They don't have that 500 acres or 1,000 acres to hunt.
Right.
You have to pinpoint when you go in, and I just think that's a cool shift with the trail cams. It's definitely the cell cams are really helping in that aspect.
They're definitely efficient.
Yeah.
Jace, same question for you.
Believing a deer is there is something that I struggled with a lot last year, and not having trail cameras and just going off of a pure belief system that a deer is there is probably one of the hardest things that I've encountered. It was definitely the hardest thing that I encountered last year. And, part of that goes into, how much will a deer actually take before they leave? I learned that last year that it actually does take a lot more to get a deer to leave somewhere than what I had originally thought. Now, that depends on, I think, mostly what kind of cover is available to them. Like, if they're just living in a 1 acre, open wood lot, you bump them out of there and, they might not come back to that. They might. But if you bump them out of thick cover and they can move, 200 yards and still be in thick cover, they're probably not going to leave. They're probably just going to run around in circles. But the whole belief system for me, I'll give you guys a couple examples about how it actually hurt me a couple times last year. So Kentucky turned out fine, but I did not believe that deer I killed, crabs, I did not believe that deer was still around, because that deer had been harassed and shot at and bombed and tracked by dogs and, everything. and that deer was still there. And so my belief system was, oh, well, a deer will only take like X amount, before they leave. Well, that wasn't the case with him. And I never had to question it with the other deer I was hunting down there, because he was back in the same field, once every 3 days after he got bumped. So he would leave for a couple days, then, come back. But, it was a good thing the crab was still there. So later on in the season, I get on this really big buck here in Missouri. It was like 170-inch 12. And I'm chasing him around right in the middle of the rut. And this place in particular was fairly open woods. And there was out-of-state hunters like crazy in this place, hunting with guns. Like there was, 9 people just from, I don't even know where it was, Massachusetts or something.
Ohio.
That was just one group.
Wow.
And, so I bumped that deer where he was living at on public. And then I figured between that and all the other pressure that was around, I thought he left. And so my belief system was, this deer takes, X amount and then he's gone. Well, he wasn't gone, but I was already to like Illinois and, on to Nebraska by the time I figured out that he was still around. Thankfully, one of my buddies had a trail camera in there and picked him up like later on in November. So the belief system that a deer is there, whenever you don't have trail cameras and you don't know for sure, that's been one of the hardest things that I've encountered here in the last season.
Gotcha.
I don't even know if I answered your guys' question. I don't remember.
No, I liked how it was answered, because, and then kind of and at least in my head, this is how I wrapped around it. So Dave, his experience was run the cameras, and we're talking about being in like a box, right?
Yeah.
As in like a small 50-acre chunk,
yeah, versus
like a large public land chunk. So Dave's obstacle was the land boundary line.
Yeah.
So he ran cameras, stayed out of there. Once the deer came in, then he hunted it. On the flip side,
yeah,
Jace had the opportunity to move, but the pressure from other hunters discouraged you from not continuing that chase. So it's like you've got the both sides of the fence on one difficulty versus another, and that's at least how I took it. Maybe you guys took it differently.
I think that's the perfect comparison. I think that's like the limited private land hunter is the same difficulties in different areas as the guy that can hunt public, but with lots of pressure.
A bunch of pressure.
I think that's a great comparison.
And different skill sets on public too, because like on private, if you're hunting with your buddies or something, you kind of work as a team. Public, it's a free-for-all. I mean, never know who's going where or how hard they're hunting or what their skill level is.
Who walked their dog down the trail and took their kids down to the creek and bumped them out.
Yeah. So... Jace, one thing, so I know at the beginning you said you might dive into some trail cameras. What kind of made you not want to run trail cameras, or when do you think you might run trail cameras? I'm just curious, for my personal self.
Like originally, like growing up, like I didn't grow up around trail cameras, so it wasn't, something like, whenever I was 5 years old, like, no, fuck trail cameras, I'm not using those. It was, my dad, took me out in the woods, showed me, how to find deer. So like here in recent years, what I've learned, there's a deer standing in my backyard. Sorry. Like a squirrel over here. So like what I've come to the realization of, using trail cameras and all that good stuff, and why I'm going to start using it moving forward is, I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, but it's just the efficiency of trail cameras and, specifically cell cameras. For Missouri, if I'm looking at an average 4.5-year-old buck, I'm going to say that deer is probably going to be, 140 inches. Some of them get a lot bigger than that. Some of them don't get that big. But as far as, middle ground, that's pretty much what it is. So like if I'm going out scouting and I'm looking for, better sign, I'm looking, for, little better rubs, little better tracks and stuff like that. I can only tell to a certain degree. Like I'm pretty sure I can tell, not all the time, but I'm pretty sure I can tell like the difference, from a track for a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, maybe the rub height, from a 3-year-old to your 4-year-old, that's not an exact science, but I can't tell if that deer has long G4s. I can't tell if he has strong brows, looking at a rub or looking at a track. And, I know enough now, like some of these deer I've killed that are really big, their track is smaller than a doe's track. So unless you are actually there to physically see that deer, if we were looking for above average deer, which are rare, then you have to have a wider cast net and you actually have to lay your eyes on these deer. You have to get a look at them if you are looking for a certain score of a deer. So where that translates for me is if I'm looking for deer that are just 150 and bigger, there is no way that I could ever look at sign and tell you if this is a 150 or bigger. If it's an abnormally large deer, tall or, it's got a, big body or whatever the hell it is, I can probably tell you that. Still yet, I have an 11.5-year-old buck back here that's a spike. So,
yeah.
So, for me, for my goals, I need to know exactly what that deer is. And, Missouri early season, I have enough time throughout the summertime where I can glass and find that deer. But if I'm wanting to do that throughout multiple states or places where I can't glass, then I have to, there's no other way for me to know. And especially, in the time frame that I need to do it, which is, a largely sped up time frame than what I'm used to. But, that's something that cell cameras have, allowed us to do.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, Jace, you may not know what the deer size is by looking at sign stuff, but you just gotta go to the comment section of a YouTube video or a Facebook post, and those 14-year-olds, you post a picture of that sign, and they're gonna tell you what the score is. So I just want you to maybe take a step back, talk to some kids on the internet, and you don't need you don't need cell cams actually.
Yeah.
So
TikTok,
yeah,
they're the worst. Whoever's on TikTok, you guys are brutal.
Yeah, we've learned a lot of hunting just from our TikTok.
I've learned more.
I'm dumb. I've learned. So I just want you to make a note and then search for help, and then that's gonna take care of it. Okay.
That's
10-4.
I do want to talk to Dave once on the cell camera, or maybe just trail camera in general. So I've noticed, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, both of you, I've kind of noticed that like the trail camera thing is starting to like become, let's say, less popular kind of on social media. And maybe I'm wrong for saying this, but
I'm just curious where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Because like I've kind of noticed that there's like a trend of like there's a small percentage of people that are saying that, and we might have lost Jace, but we'll find out here in a second.
We'll see if he comes back.
So there's a small percentage of people that I see on social media that are almost saying like where I'm getting at is the new cool thing to do is going to be to kill a mature buck without a trail camera. Mm-hmm. Mark my words, that's going to be the new fad in my mind. I think that like say a couple years from now, people are going to be bashing you. Oh, you've got trail cam pictures of that deer.
Dumb.
It's not good enough. Like I went out there and killed him with no trail camera.
Yeah.
And like I think the woodsman or like the outdoorsman thing is going to become popular. And I guess I just wanted to talk to you, Dave, and see if you had that same opinion, and hopefully Jace comes back on. Because
maybe I made him mad with that.
We just no, you didn't make him.
I'm just joking.
I just want to get maybe your opinion and what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, no, I agree. I could easily see it, shifting to that. I think the trail cameras are tough anymore because it's become so competitive. Like for us, obviously, like we don't have a massive following, but we're followed by enough people that if I post a picture of a deer and on trail camera, and all of a sudden, like, somebody local's like, oh, I got a picture of that deer too, and he's going over this way, or he's doing this, or whatever. Or we've had people literally try and backdoor us based on trail camera pictures that we've posted.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think that's why, like, the trail camera thing is starting to dwindle a little bit, because a couple of years ago, you could trail camera kill deer. People were trail camera killing deer all the time.
Yep.
I got a picture of this deer. He's already dead.
Yep.
He's already dead. I got a picture of him in July. He's already dead. You know?
Yeah.
That's how it was. And we've shifted a little bit more to, like, running far less cameras this time of year, because we realize that it literally doesn't matter. Like, it might matter, but it also doesn't matter. Like,
Right.
so you're just burning batteries. If you're running cell cameras, you're burning,
Data.
You're paying for the data plans. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, we've kind of reeled back on that a little bit, but I can easily see where you're going with that, and could see that being, like, the next step of, like, the public land thing. Oh, I killed this thing. I didn't have one trail camera picture of them. Like, that's going to be
100%.
That's going to be, like, the next big thing. I definitely agree.
Yeah, like, mark my words. I'm a firm believer in this. I feel that in a couple of years, like, the trail cam thing is going to, and personally, I'm the biggest trail camera junkie you'll ever meet in your life. Like, every time one's on sale, yep, I'll take 2 of those. I mean, I love them, dude.
More
like,
eyes.
I mean, I will litter a woods with trail cameras, and that's fun for me. Like, I grew up checking trail cameras with my old man, and it was just kind of like, it's just like tradition. And I love, like, seeing every once in a while you get, like, an owl swooping at a squirrel or something. Like, that stuff's so cool to me.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand. And I wish Jace was on, because not to bash the public land hunters, but, like, that's the crowd that it's coming from. And I wanted to ask Jace, like, what his thoughts were on why that was a thing, because I think it's because they're going to argue woodsmanship. They're going to say, well, I killed him because I'm a woodsman. I didn't just have $1,000 invested in trail cameras. But here's my argument to that. And Dave, maybe you can, go your direction with it. Like, when people say that, like, the cell camera killed that deer, to an extent, you could say that, but you still have to know where to put the cell camera. You still have to know,
Put the stand.
You still have to know how to access him to kill him. You still have to know everything to kill. I don't care where you're at. A mature buck's still a mature buck. One might be more pressured than the other, but I mean, trying to kill a mature animal is difficult. I don't care if you're on private or public. I mean, it's difficult, and I guess that's kind of where I was going with that. Maybe you have a different opinion, Dave.
No, I completely agree. I mean, and it comes back to all the way to the point of the encounter. Like, you have to be able to hold it together to make a good shot.
Yeah.
Some people it doesn't matter. Like, they just come unglued and they can't hold it together. And like, that is one thing that I learned from Ben Rising. Like, out of anything that, like, just by observation and by listening to him and by producing his shows taught me, is out of anybody that I know, that dude can hold it together when a giant deer steps into his world. He can hold it together better than anybody that I know. So it doesn't matter if you have a trail camera picture of that deer or not.
Yeah.
When he steps into your world, how can you handle it? How can you handle it?
Yep, that's a valid point.
I mean, so, like, I think that's obviously the trail cameras can keep you excited about it, and they can keep you kind of going out there, especially if you're getting photos of them and stuff like that. But there is, like, why I started hunting some public land and stuff like that too, to kind of flip to the other side of the coin, is, like, there is, like, some of the unknown factor in kind of what's out there when you're sitting in a stand and you're spending hours out there. That to me is kind of cool, and, like, all of a sudden you got a 140-inch buck chasing a hot doe, and you got to make a decision based on just the unknown. You got to make a decision. Is this a buck that I want to kill, or does it meet my standards, or does it not? Am I going to wait?
Yeah.
With the unknown. With trail cameras, it's easy to say, I can pass that deer because I know there's a bigger one, or there's a couple bigger ones in this woods. Without the trail cameras, you're making a split-second decision on, is that identifying, like, is that deer enough or not? And sometimes your emotions and your mental psyche can take over and tell you that deer is maybe something that it's not,
Yeah.
So you get yourself in a situation
Ground
where you're
shrinkage.
like, that's where ground shrinkage came from, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Jace, we lost you for a minute, and I can't even go back and what did I even ask?
About cell cams and
Killing deer without getting a trail camera picture is the next like big thing.
Oh, okay, thank you. So
ask Jace if he heard that.
We'll just ask you the question, and you can give your stance on it, Jace, because Dave just gave his, and sorry that you didn't get to hear that, but we'll just get your opinion. So the question that I asked before we lost you was, I feel, and I'm probably going to butcher the way that I asked it the first time, but I feel that there's a movement of people, a small percentage of people that are claiming that, it's not. How did I word it? I'm totally drawing a blank.
People are going to start bragging about killing deer by not using cameras at all. That's the new path that Matt's talking about. Is like there's going to be a new group of people coming in to like brag about how they didn't have a single picture of the deer and it was mature. That's what the question. That was the statement.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm slowly starting to see a group of people on social media kind of like bragging or boasting about not running cameras because they're a better woodsman or an outdoorsman. And I just kind of, let's put everybody in a box, right? This is all hypothetical. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody specific, but most of this is coming from the public land hunters. And I was just curious on what your thoughts were on that.
Well, I can tell you first off, I am guilty of that.
Great question then.
That's hilarious.
And I guess it is just like a way to like, step away from, the crowd, get away from, the people in the box or, something, because I mean, you don't hear about, that many people, going in on, whatever kind of ground, just going in, with no trail cameras and just, scouting and then, coming out of there with mature deer. It's not really something that you hear a whole lot of.
Let's wrap
We've
this
had
up.
Dave on for like 2 hours.
Yeah,
Thank you, Dave.
I feel so bad.
I'm with it, man.
We've had a good time.
We've taken up enough of your time. Let's just wrap it up. Give your closing statement, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a private land hunter, I really enjoy it. And I think people can get the joy out of being able to give back to the land as much as they take from it. Because you're not only affecting your 50 acres or 100 acres or 150 acres, whatever you've got, you're affecting the wildlife and really the hunting in the adjacent properties around you. And so for anybody that hasn't experienced it's I don't know that there's much better than, like I said earlier, being able to prepare the ground, sow the seed, actually get something to grow. Because if you've never done it before, it's not like you just put seed in the ground and it comes up. There are conditions involved, and there are a lot of different scenarios, and weather plays a major factor in things actually being able to grow. So that's such a long process, and it's taken us years on years to kind of figure out. But once you kind of get ingrained in that, and you're literally able to, manipulate your property to create food, cover, watershed, to better it for the animals, it takes it to a whole new level. Yeah. And you kind of get a new, different appreciation for the lives that you're taking on that property, because you're not just taking, but you're giving back to the, you're giving back. And
that's a cool point.
If you have standards, then you've given back to that animal for many, many years in a row, at least partially. And it's a good feeling. It feels like you're taking the stewardship of the land to full circle. Yeah. And so that's what I enjoy about it most. And that's why I'm on the private land side.
I love that answer. I really do, because like most guys think that, once again, we're talking about boxes, right? So like most guys would say, oh, that private land hunter, he's just got all the money and he just buys the deer and he just puts out the supplemental feed. But like, I'm really, really, really happy with how you answered the questions today, because I hunt, I'd say mostly private, and then mostly out of state I hunt public. And so I'm honestly, like, I've hunted a share amount of public where I can dab my toes in it and honestly give a good feedback. And I'm glad that you talk about how much work that you put in, because I get that a lot as a private land hunter in Ohio. I get the, oh, well, you just bought that deer. Oh, you know, I don't have any leases personally, but like, oh, you just leased it, or, you know, and it's like, sometimes it's not the case. You know, but it goes full circle on public too. Like, those guys are busting their rumps as well.
Right.
And if Jace was here, you know, he would argue that as well. He talked about that buck that he was chasing in Missouri, and a bunch of guys from out of state came in and pushed the deer out, and it's like, you can't do anything about it because
crazy story.
You know, it's
and the one in Kentucky where he hunted, what was it, 18 days straight
after
that one deer? We talked to him on a previous podcast. I mean, that's dedication. 18 days straight is a long time to hunt a group of deer and stuff like that. So it's no joke.
Those guys, honestly, like the diehard public land dudes, a lot of respect for them guys
100%.
Because they're busting their butts. But on the flip side, I would say the diehard private land guys are also doing just as much work, but in a different way. So I mean, we have to respect both sides of the fence, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Agree more.
all right, let's wrap it up.
We got a final question for you, and that is, what have you learned from hunting that you can apply to your everyday life?
I think just honestly the value of life in general. You know, I certainly don't take it lightly. I think any of the diehard hunters, it's not just going out there and killing, but it's just kind of learning the value of a life and respecting that. And you can take that anywhere in your everyday life and your, relationships and your family, whether it's family, friends, or anything like that, and just appreciate the people that are around you and the life that is surrounding you. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just the value of a life. That there's so many crazy, hectic things going on in this world these days. And, that out of anything is getting lost a little bit, I think. So
I agree. I like that answer a lot. Well, why don't we let Dave, we're going to give you the opportunity. If you want to stay on, you're more than welcome. If you got stuff to do, feel free. We'll let Jace finish what he was answering, get his final thoughts, his closing statement, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, I got to run, but I appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
thanks for joining us.
Had a blast.
Appreciate
Thank you, sir.
See ya.
Yeah, we'll talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, see ya. Hey, Jace.
All right.
Hey,
welcome back.
How's it going? Long time no see. How's the man?
Oh, man.
No, you're
I'm
good.
sorry about that, guys.
It's all right.
You're good.
Don't sweat it.
I have 2 phones and a computer, and I can't get a damn one of them to work.
It's
No,
okay.
you're good.
Don't sweat it. Seriously.
Don't stress.
We got editing skills over here, so we're good. We're good. Kevin.
Well, while I was messing with my other phone, I managed to get like 7% on this phone here, so I guess it's just going to stay at 7 or possibly go down.
Okay.
So we'll see how long.
We'll finish. We'll let you wrap up.
Yeah, just wrap it up real quick, and then we'll end it.
Okay.
So we were talking about the camera thing, and you were kind of getting into that on the not using cameras, and kind of that's going to be the new fad. And you kind of
So I already admitted to being one of those guys that like thinks it's that like brags about it on social media. I think I was going into you don't really see it a whole lot. Now with the amount of cameras out there, really what I would like to try to do, rather than being a person that's just bragging on social media, is actually show people something. And what I want to show people is one, the woodsmanship side of things. And I guess, some more of my thoughts about that is like, say you have somebody and they grew up hunting and all they knew was trail cameras. And then for some reason, or, say it was cell cameras, now, and, somebody takes that away from them, in the future. It's like, what does that guy have left? His arsenal of tools to go and try to, get the job done.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's probably not gonna be a whole lot. And that the whole public versus private thing, hunting, one property and just knowing what goes on that one property. There's a lot of different factors that goes into deer movement and where deer are. And unless you get out and physically see some of these things, it would kind of be hard to know otherwise. And trail cameras can only show you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what I would, if it was me and I was like catering this person, it's like, okay, you're going to be a hunter, but you're stuck with nothing. I would like to grow like a big base knowledge, for somebody, some really, really good foundation that they can they can build off of in the future. Because I believe if you start out with the woodsmanship side of things, learn differences in tracks, learn differences in sign, learn differences in where deer are given a property. And that's also something I was talking about earlier, having the opportunity to go out and hunt different properties within your given area. Because the thing that relates here is the same thing that relates over to that property, that relates over to that property, that relates over to this property. And so you have a lot more opportunity to learn what those kind of things are. But to the person that were kind of catering up, if I can show somebody, if I can give somebody all the wood tools that I have, and I know that guy can go out and kill deer without trail cameras, and then whenever you gotten to the point where I feel like, like I was talking about earlier, you'd only get up to a certain point where you can tell how big deer are based off sign alone.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add in trail cameras to your process, if you want to take it that far.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys don't. And, I don't blame them. A lot of, my hunting, there's quite a few bucks that I have that are, like this, spikes or forkhorns and whatnot, pound away. But, if you're trying to go for something bigger, if you do want to take that next step, then I think trail cameras is that next step.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's coming, from the perspective of a guy that has never used trail cameras ever. So
Sure.
I imagine there's things that people that only use trail cameras, I'm sure they know a hell of a lot more things than I do, things that, I'm going to learn, whenever I start to use trail cameras.
Mm-hmm.
But, getting that baseline of learning down before you do that, I think is, I don't know if you'd call it like a more sustainable way, but what I can do with my skill set is I feel like I can go anywhere with my skills and start out anywhere and find deer.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, if you've only hunted one property your whole life and, you've had trail cameras in, 4 or 5 spots and you're like, oh, well, yeah, deer come through there in, November. Well, you might be able to take some of that to a different property, but versus the guy that's hunted, 10 properties in, 5 different states, he's going to have a lot more experience, a lot more know-how, what to, go about and what to look at, what to look for.
Yeah.
No, you have valid points, and I honestly, you can't argue that. I mean, honestly, you just can't.
And you can't put all your eggs in one basket either, you know, relying just on cameras or, whatever. Like you said, you're going to move on to getting cameras in the future too, to widen your skill set then too.
Yep. I like that answer a lot.
Cool.
Well, Jace, I think we're going to let you give your final statement of, why you're a public land hunter. And then we'll ask you our final question, and then I think our podcast is good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So for the closing statement, private versus public, I I still think people should go out and experience, both. I doubt any trash talkers ever going to listen to this, but know your fields before you start talking trash on them. I've learned some of that here recently on social media. But if you're a guy, you're looking, for, more experiences, more tags, different terrain, just a different experience where, there is a potential of unlimited amount of competition, there. And, if that's something that you want to get into, then, public land is your deal. But if you're more of the, like our friend was saying, if you enjoy, more of that, one-on-one time with your particular piece of land that you get to, sculpt and, make exactly how you want and make it the best situation possible for you. And, also get the opportunity to watch deer in their normal states, then, private lands, probably the way to go. And, not everybody can do that with their piece of private, but if that's something that you're into, then so be it. Like I said, I've done both, and a mature deer on public is a mature deer on private. They're still both extremely hard to kill.
Yes,
they're not that old for no reason. Deer throughout the whole United States, they experience some amount of pressure. There's some pockets where they don't, but at the end of the day, what do you want out of it? That's really the question that you need answered.
Yeah.
Yep.
Agree.
What kind of experience you're after?
Like the answer. And I love how he mentioned, because while you were switching phones, we had another discussion about that exact same thing, about a mature deer on public is just as hard to kill as a mature deer on private. And let's say a pressured private.
Yeah, there you go.
Because like guys are going to say, "Oh, well, you got 1,000 acres." We're not talking. We're talking about the average Joes, because there's only like 1% of people that hunt private that have access to 1,000 acres.
Almost unlimited. Yeah.
Most guys are hunting 30, 40, 50, let's say less than 100 acres.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that deer's pressured because the neighbors, and we don't have to get into it. But
we went through it. Yeah, we went through all of it.
I'm glad that Jace brought that up as well. So the public land guy also sees it's equally as hard. The private land also said the same thing. And I like how we come together on that.
Yeah, that was cool.
That's what we're doing this podcast for.
Yep.
Really.
That's right. Holding hands.
Nice.
All right, let's wrap it up, Kevy.
Okay, so the final question for you is, what have you learned from hunting that you can apply to your everyday life?
Oh man, I could get kind of crazy with that one.
Please.
Yeah.
Let's see. Things that I've learned in hunting for everyday life. Well, sometimes the best things take time. That's one, not to be too run of the mill of an answer there. But I think, and I learned this a lot, and I learned so much in Kentucky last year, not only about deer in general, but things about myself, really. Whenever I'm in a hard situation where there's pain and suffering involved, in something with that, and just putting your head down and just staying in that. A lot of people, they, no matter what it is, they quit, 25% through, 25% of the way through, or, a lot of them, you go through, all this pain, all this discomfort, you're wondering why, you're not really sure, why it is at the time. And then, you finally get to see, what it is, at the end of it. Like, right now I'm trying to, start up my own business, and that has a lot of, pain and, discomfort and,
yes, it does.
uncomfortability.
It does. Yeah.
Has a lot. And, because I've done things, like the Kentucky trip where, that was a lot harder thing than what I'm experiencing now, because I've done things like that, because I've gone out and, put myself out there in, situations that have been, uncomfortable or hard. Some of the harder things now, they don't seem too hard whenever I start comparing it to stuff like that. So, that's probably here in the recent year, that's probably been one of my biggest takeaways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Love the answer. Yeah. Love the answer. And for those of you that don't maybe understand the context of his Kentucky trip, correct me, Jace, you were out there for 18, 21, how many days was it?
20 days.
20 days.
Okay.
So 20 days this man was out in Kentucky.
Which podcast was that? What number? What you remember, Kevin?
I don't remember.
Early in the teens?
It was right after our Kentucky series.
It was one of our earlier ones, probably in the 30s somewhere.
Yeah, it was.
It would have been like
earlier than that.
10, 15.
Gotcha.
Something like that. I can look it up and put a link.
If anybody wants to find it, you can hop on my page. I have a Linktree link on there.
Yep.
It's in there.
Sweet.
Okay.
Sweet. Well, we appreciate it.
Yeah, that was a really cool story. And like you said, like you push yourself to the limits, and that's going to teach you. Like you put yourself in a situation on public land that most people wouldn't do that to themselves.
No, I mean,
most people wouldn't put themselves through that, and that probably taught you a ton about yourself. That and that's how you tie it to life. And I just thinking about your story, I completely agree. Like you pushed yourself because of hunting. I'm not sure that there's any other hobby in your or anything in your life that would have pushed you as hard as hunting did.
No,
specifically for you, Jace.
Yeah.
No way.
And that's if most of us here.
Yep.
Like there's really nothing. Like we live in the day of age where like you don't have to push yourself in any way.
Pretty cushy life.
Yeah.
I mean, can be.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're fortunate enough, and that's cool.
I love it.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jace, for coming on. Why don't you plug yourself real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. Where can people find you on social media?
Sure. You can find me on Facebook. My name is Jace Allen, JACEALLEN, or you can find me on Instagram. You can find me by my lovely Instagram handle, Nature of the Beast. There's going to be a Whitetail Addictions episode come out here sometime this summer of the deer that we had called crabs down there in Kentucky.
Oh, that's cool.
Nice.
You all will get to see me absolutely lose it out there in the field.
I'll be definitely watching that one.
Yeah, that'll be a good one.
Cool.
Pretty embarrassing for me, but
no, that's good for you.
I cried on camera last year, so you're good. It's an emotional roller coaster, man. I swear. Like nobody, you can't explain it unless you've been through it. It's an emotional roller coaster.
I like down there. I experienced emotions that I didn't even know that I was capable of.
I believe it.
Yep.
Like that's. I mean, opening up. I don't want to get too crazy with it. I know we're trying to wrap it up, but
yeah.
No, I get it.
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
Yeah. If you're a hunter, you know exactly what we're talking about.
He doesn't have to go any farther.
If you're not a hunter, kill something and you'll understand what we're talking about.
Deer, preferably.
All right, thanks, Jace. We're going to close it and we're going to wrap this baby up.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody, and that'll conclude our buck battle series for this year at least.
Yep.
So, already doesn't matter what you've done in the past. You can always be born again, and born again is out.
Peace.
See ya.